Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, and welcome to our next edition of Decoding AQ. I have with us today Nancy Watt. Now, Nancy describes herself as a pracademic, if I'm pronouncing that right. That's the kind of approach that you take to applied positive psychology using improv. So that's maybe a mix of practical and academic, right?
Exactly right.
Perfect. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Great. So I read that, your workshops, you focus on communication and leadership, and particularly in this area of helping people deal with unpredictability, help them build mental agility and innovation. Just tell us a little bit about how you've got to there from where I read you started, sort of working in big pharma workshops. Give us a little bit of a whistle-stop tour to that.
Sure. Well, thank you. Well, I was in big pharma, and nothing wrong with that job. Great job. Wasn't quite the right job for me. It didn't have enough of me or what I needed, and which is basically read creativity and that type of outlet in that job. But worked with some of the nicest people I've ever met in big pharma. So I left in 2006. And when I was a little girl, Ross, my hero was Carol Burnett. Carol Burnett, a pioneering comedian, and she was just great. And I loved, and I used to act as a kid. And after I left pharma, I stayed home with my very young children at the time, but quickly grew a little bit restless and decided to try my hand again at acting. So I did. I quickly got an agent. And before I knew it, all of a sudden, oh my God, I had done like half a dozen commercials, always, interestingly, ever cast as the mother. I was just always the mother. I was the minivan mom, the Canadian hockey arena mom, the chicken stirring mom, And when you would go on a lot of auditions, they would say, okay, good prep, good audition. Now improvise something. Now do a little improv in the audition, And I thought, oh, geez, I need more practice at that. I need to get better at improv. So I tell you, when my children were in bed, like a thief in the night, I used to leave the house and take the GO train into downtown Toronto to Second City, drop in improv classes. And there I discovered a world of improvisation. And I tell you, improv changed my life. I was immediately intrigued with the pedagogy of what was going on, the deep connection and communication and mindful, playful mindfulness that was going on. It was a game changer. And fast forward, then I auditioned to become part of the conservatory in Second City, and I was twice as old and half as cool as the rest of my troupe. And then I continued on and did the comedy sketch writing, and then did a bit of the TV and films online stuff with Chicago Second City, and then went back to school and studied more positive psychology for optimal human functioning and how applied improv informs that. And taking all of the evidence-based research into that psychology and behavioral economics and neuroscience, and then practically applying it with experiential learning, it exploded. Like I am having so much fun. And the creative agency that I run works with all sectors. And that's what we do. We do applied improv workshops around leadership and communication and adaptability and all of that.
It's so interesting. One of my favorite memories, actually, pre-COVID, I was going to Chicago every 90 days with Strategic
Oh, no way.
Coach. And prior to that, I was coming to Toronto every 90 days for a few years. But I visited Second City in Chicago. Wasn't the last time, it was the time before. And a group of us went.
Okay.
And I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Really enjoyed, it was kind of a off main stage that we experienced.
Okay, good.
And, is this just a wonderful opportunity of where humans react to things in unexpected ways? How do you keep the flow? How do you do that? And yes, I imagine there's lots of skills and techniques with it, but just that human nature to be able to come up with new things when you put something in the mix. I really, I'm fascinated by it. And I love the fact that you've got a connection to something that's so fun, so enjoyable in the workplace.
That is awesome. I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
why? Why did you find that so intriguing? What was it about that that you loved, that
Well, I think
entertaining?
the reason I go over there is very strategic and business. You know, we're there. It's a entrepreneurial coaching environment,
Sure.
and you know, generally after you've had a head filled of these thinking about your thinking workshops,
Metacognition,
you know,
exhaust.
you
Yeah,
just want to go and perhaps just veg, you know, just
sure.
meditate. And by a group of us going there, I just found it so is able to escape, but also just a way in which I don't know, it gave me a new lens to see things. And I guess that's what learning's all about, isn't it? Is finding new ways to see things.
Oh, you
As
took the words right out of my mouth. The new lens, the
Yeah,
new lens. When we, uh, one of the wonderful things, in fact, I just had a great conversation with a group of scientists around the difference in audiences investment in an improv show as opposed to traditional theater. You know,
okay, yeah,
and how emotionally invested the audiences are because what they are witnessing has never before been performed. You know, they are a part of it. Very often they have
yep,
given the offer, as we
yes,
call it. You know, they have given, you know, this scene is going to be about sea turtles or whatever, right? And they watch it, and they are invested in the co-creation, and they are neurologically, psychologically, emotionally attuned to what is going on, the story. It is not just unfolding before them. They are indeed a part of
part of
it.
it.
And that is fascinating. And when you say, you know, to watch people just react and, you know, tap into a spontaneity, I tell you, one of the most satisfying things about delving into the research and applying this is watching what happens when people tap that spontaneity. And they have an intuitive knowledge that rarely sees the light of day, but is allowed to be expressed in
Yeah,
improv, you know, and very specific exercises. And I wish I had $1 for every time, you know, somebody left a workshop and said something like, I did not see that coming, or I
yeah,
did not, you know, I did not expect that. The and you know, when you also said, you know, I'm sure there are some rules and what makes that work. Indeed, you are right. Of course, there is,
yeah,
you know, and the fundamental rule of improvisation is something called yes and. Yes and. Yes and means that when you and I are on stage together, I agree with the
yeah,
reality that you have created. You know, I agree with what wherever we are. If we're on a sailboat, you say we're on a sailboat, and the you know, the coming winds and the large waves, I yes that. I agree with it. The and is where I heighten and I add my own contribution to the scene. I advance the scene, as it were, you know. And I tell you why I think that applied improv is a great way to learn is that it parallels what learning does emotionally for a human being. When we learn, as you know, you have done such great work with adaptability. You understand the reticence, the initial speed bump that
yep,
many of us have with learning and unlearning, but hold that thought.
yep,
The learning is, and the yes gives us that necessary vulnerability. You know, I mean, I don't know what I'm about to agree with when I get on stage, you know, like whatever you say, I have to sort of agree with. Interestingly, I don't necessarily have to like it, but I have to agree that that is indeed the environment that we're working with. The and of the yes and, where I contribute, is empowerment. I get to put my hand on the rudder and steer a little bit where the scene is going. And I try to be deeply attuned to you, and I try to make you look good. And we are co-creating something together. And this combination of this combination of human learning, whereby we are vulnerable, empowered, vulnerable, empowered, vulnerable, empowered, is exactly what the pedagogical research shows in scaffolded learning, and how we become more, how we become
How
more
we just
confident.
become more. It's as simple as that.
How we become.
Yeah, how we become.
How we become.
In listening to that, for me, it was this sense of, yes is one of discovery, and then you're getting control. So it's out of control, in control.
Right.
It's openness to, now I'm closing something in my realm, and just that dance between the two. It's a lot like jazz. I've been to lots of jazz festivals, and the difference between a performance and a jazz that's off the cuff, where people just are playing their instruments and riding off each other. Who knows when one's going stronger and the other one's feeling back, but there's just that energy and flow. There's respect. There's, I acknowledge you've played that note. I'm now going to play this one from here. I've acknowledged you've gone slow. I'm going to go fast. All of those sorts of just poetry of things is interesting. Now,
in terms of poetic.
It is. In terms of people like us that are open, creative, we're quick start, and we are smiling and energized by the very thought of this. I know there are people that would be the exact opposite. They'd be running to the back of the room. They wouldn't be smiling. Everything about them would be, I'm uncomfortable. Tell me some stories about, getting this into not a, drink-fueled, a bar environment with snacks where people have signed up for this and they're up to it, to, I'm now in work and someone's, organized an improv session. What's that been like?
And WTF? Who ordered her?
Yeah.
I can't tell you. I love that question.
Tell us some stories.
Love that question. Some of my best stories, some of my most satisfying workshops have come from individuals who are initially so reticent. I love how you talk about yes and being, one of discovery. And that's indeed what we talk about too. Discover, uncover. And what we uncover is yet to be unknown. And when you think about the scientific methodology of discovery and innovation and curiosity mindset, that is necessary and absolutely critical. So I get to do a ton of work in STEM. I work with engineers and physicists and technologists. And I tell you what, walking into a room, I get that wall of like, I don't do improv. I don't do funny. I don't do, and when we think about humor as the role in society and how we can use humor and comedy to learn by tapping that spontaneity, it's good to sort of go to the research. And it has been my strong anecdotal experience that if you're dealing with engineers, surgeons, lawyers, and scientists, you got to start with why. Why are we about to do this before we do this? It just, that they need to know.
Work. Yep.
Exactly. And thankfully, with the intellectual rigor and enough evidence-based research, which thank God there is, you build the case for doing so. And interestingly, when you talk about jazz too, Ross, there's a great researcher named Dr. Charles Lim out of Berkeley. He did fMRI studies on jazz musicians to understand what was going on with their brain neurologically when they were in an improvised state. And indeed, I'm one of the producers now of a documentary with Colin Mockery from Whose Line Is It Anyway? That show might know.
Yeah.
And we put Colin in this laboratory at Berkeley and watch where his mind went when he did improv. And the part of the brain that is suppressed when we are in an improvised state is something called the lateral prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that is, the reticence, the guardedness, the self-monitoring, the part of the brain that tells us, in a group of scientists, they're all saying, I don't do that, don't do that, don't go there. The part of the brain that lights up when we are in a creative and playful state is called the medial prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that is responsible for, among other things, self-expression. So it has been my experience that armed with that neurological data, I put them in that necessary discomfort. I make them uncomfortable and watch them. When you're talking to physicists, it's good to speak in their language. So I will tell them to watch for the phase change of their feelings. Watch for a feeling of change from being intellectual to creative, from being methodical to playful, and watch what ideas and innovative thoughts come as a result. And I can tell you, when I was at Princeton working with a group of physicists, they just about killed me, but at the end it was so rewarding, and they had deep collaboration and newfound respect for each other's ideas as a result of following the ensemble building process. I'm writing a book right now with a judge. And we are looking at how applied improv techniques are useful for the lawyer in a courtroom. The lawyer is never goes into a court unprepared, and yet she or he should also be able to
ready for the curveball.
Ready for the inevitable curveball.
Yep.
And this judge tells me that she sees attorneys falter and really stumble and fail as a result. So building the resiliency and the adaptability muscle in a court is critically important as well. Failure is really a good idea.
This subject is applicable to every factor of life and every work environment. And where and when we use it, we can get really specific and creative about it. So this kind of thing, I think, opens up to opportunities as a stimulus and primer for certain things that follow. If this is done maybe too early in a process, when it needs to map the context, what's the why, what's the challenge, what's the framing of the event we're trying to do, versus now we're trying to diverge and look at multiple solutions. Using improv in the right phases to deal with uncertainty and unpredictability, I think, is also a really interesting thought process that I can imagine. We used to run lots of innovation programs for organizations, and many would want to come straight to the solutions, straight to the ideas, because they've been thinking about it all the time. But perhaps they hadn't defined the problem well enough, or really even uncovered what the problem was that should be worked on and solved. And so that hesitant to just rewind, establish and frame well first. And you talked about this in terms of how to get buy-in from people, whether it's about the evidence backed, because that's how they are motivated to change or to do something. And then the best thing, for all of us to get a behavioral change is experience it.
Exactly.
So the commitment for everyone listening, when they come across something, whatever it may be, try your best to experience it before judgment. And so let's see if we can give, for those who might never have come across improv outside of watching a TV show or maybe on stage, they haven't thought about it in a work context. How might this apply? And I'm thinking of something that you shared with me earlier about psychological safety and about performance pressure within people. And psychological safety is something that's discussed a lot, certainly within people and human resources. and especially around uncertainty and change. So give us a little bit of thought and your area of how people might be able to apply this today or tomorrow within their businesses, some little practical tips. Let's get straight into that, because I can't wait to hear them.
Oh, such a good question. The work of psychological safety, and I should credit Dr. Amy Edmondson, the Novaris Chair of Harvard Business School, for really, pioneering that concept. We parallel exactly the building of psychological safety with a similar improv, 4 quadrants. She talks about the building of psychological safety, not necessarily meaning, just trust or liking our team members or the people with whom we work, but having building an environment that is safe for that interpersonal risk taking, that we can have those candid and necessary conversations, and the performance pressure being such that, how much accountability I bring to make sure that the task at hand is done and done well. When I lack psychological safety, or, I'm just not, I don't feel safe in the environment, like the massive Aristotle project that Google did, they did this huge organizational dissection of 185 teams to look at what it was that made some teams so much more effective than others. And long story short, but 5 things. Number 1 was the psychological safety. It was that we could have, those candid conversations, that when I made a mistake, you were going to be okay with that. And we would learn from it. Building the learning culture, the learning, having the inherent curiosity and necessary motivation to learn as a result of, in spite of, and because of the mistakes made, is indeed the point. And culture travels in the boat of language. And so, we talk a lot in improv about listening and the 5 different ways of listening, and how the science of human reciprocity, when we give, when we take, why we do, why we don't. And that all is part and parcel of building psychological safety. I mentioned earlier that the yes and rule. The yes and rule. Yes means that we accept the reality that has been created, and we is where we advance from that. And although some of our
that allows us to exist in the learning zone, doesn't it? In terms of these quadrants, that when we're in there, and paint us a picture of these other quadrants that you mentioned in terms of the psychological safety and the performance pressure, and how they then relate to improv, because I found that just fascinating.
When I had lunch with Dr. Edmondson at Harvard Square several years ago, she found it fascinating too. Yep. And we had interviewed her for the documentary as well, with Applied Improv with Colin Mockery. It is important work because, again, it is the practical application of her academic theory. That's what I do. That's what I, tell me the theory and let me apply it in improv. So with someone with a low yes in our organization, in our team, say, for someone who is perhaps a contrarian, or someone who says not yes and, but yes, but, oh my God, beware of the word but. But is an immediate speed bump in collaboration. People put up walls with that word but immediately. Men, women, ethnicity, the cultures, it's the same thing. So with a low yes and a low and, they don't necessarily advance the scene. She talks about an individual being in the apathy quadrant. Very often in large bureaucratic organizations, and in improv, we talk about someone with a low yes, a low and being a blocker. We talk about a blocker. When you are on stage and you say, Nance, we're in a sailboat, and I say, no, we're not. I have blocked the scene, and it goes so. For someone with a high yes or a high psychological safety, as we parallel these 2 theories of thought, Amy Edmondson talks about one being in the comfort zone. Being in the comfort zone where we have high psychological safety, but not a lot of accountability, not a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves. And I think perhaps many of us have been in a period in our career where we're sort of coasting or we're in that comfort zone. In improv, if you have a high yes, you agree with everything that's going on stage, but you're not advancing it yourself. You're not putting yourself out there to risk and empower the scene forward. We call that the passenger. The passenger. They're just sort of along for the ride.
I think we can all recognize in our careers and lives when there's been passengers, and potentially those are at such high risk right now. Because the pressure that we're under of, economic pressure, social pressure, all of these things, to have passengers that just go with the flow, that aren't creating value, that aren't helping a direction and movement of forwards. There's just no room for them anymore.
No.
The others, they show up and they cause us a blocker and they get dealt with. But it's maybe the passengers that are the sneaky ones. They consume the resources, the energy, they take up a seat, they use resources of the food, the time, the money, those sorts of bits, but they're not contributing more than just sitting there. So I think they're the ones to really look out for. And if you really look at yourselves and ask yourself, when am I being a passenger?
Right.
Is this good? Is this good for me? Is this good for my team? Is it good for my organization? How can I re-engineer the value that I'm now giving to the organization without this becoming a personality issue? This isn't about, control or those sorts of things. It's about how do you contribute value? What might you do?
So in improv, and that's so astute. I love that. What Amy Edmondson would say would be, in order to move someone out of the comfort zone into more of a learning zone, is to give them more work and work with meaning. Work with that allows them to tap into their purpose and, fulfillment. When you are on an improv stage and you have a passenger, you are putting more weight and responsibility on your other players to carry the scene, and you have, you are dead weight, and
they're a drainer.
You are a drain, and you're absolutely right. In today's business environment, holy cow, you're a tick and you are not long for this world. It is a Darwinian. And they are being.
They'll be on the die side of the adapt or die.
They will.
Their tasks, of their roles. That a passenger in a certain area because the process provided value, or the way they did things or showed up provided value historically. But unless they're recognizing technological changes, industrial changes of their sector, they will be left behind. And that's a big fear for people. And, the greatest piece about exponentials is it's gradual and sudden. It sneaks up on us. So we need to sharpen our awareness skills of, they're not going to be in a linear fashion of, oh yeah, I'm a passenger. It's, oh, I didn't even realize it. I am, and I'm gone. So we've got to be really looking and telling the truth to ourselves quickly about this. I urge people to do that.
You have dissected an improv scene. I love the way that you use, it is not linear. It is self-discovery. It is co-creation. It is, discovery, uncover. It is to discover and uncover. And, part of what makes individuals drop anchor there is their unwillingness or incapability to unlearn what they know. And you're right. It often comes as a shocker. Like I didn't know, and then I'm gone.
Do I have a great sort of visual piece in a story that I've used a few times, and you just triggered it by saying anchor. And it was describing a boat in a harbor with an anchor. And when the seas are choppy and the tide's going in and out, an anchor is super valuable, super helpful. It's what can save you. It's what can save the boat banging into other boats. It can mean it's still there when you come back a week later and you've gone, I like Mr. Anchor. He's been great to us. He's enabled us to, feel safe, to have value. Now let's fill that harbor with water so fast, so quickly, the anchor becomes your death. So something that served you before in an environmental context that was normal and things that were predictable and that the anchor was designed for, great. As soon as that influx of something means that that actually takes and sinks the ship, because it
Yes,
wasn't able to float, the chains were all there, and those chains, all those little things, one was called lean, one was called this, one was called, you know,
right.
email or fax messages or whatever
That's
they
right.
were, that
Yeah,
allowed us to perform, to be successful. The speed of a change can now undermine something that was historically successful for us.
absolutely.
And that's a, you know, a difficult for people when they're getting reward, when they're getting applause, when they're getting a pat on the back in whatever that might be. An applause in the sense of improv, oh, I've done that well, so I'll do that again, to an
Sure.
applause of someone's written a check for you, or
Right.
they've given you a promotion.
Right.
Now, with all of these things and all these concepts you talk about, and I love made up words, you know, these what's the word for when you combine two words together to make another one?
Oh,
I can't think of it right now, but this
oh man, there's someone listening right now who's
yeah, who's
saying it
shouting
out
it? Yeah.
loud, Ross.
So with this, where in, you know, your time you've been into organizations, tell us a
Mhm.
story of where you've seen it work really well. You talked about working with lots of STEM organization in
Sure.
terms of, you know, be it very academic type people.
Right.
um, where has it worked well? How did it work, and what problem did it solve? Give us some
Ah,
examples that we can
so
hook
great.
into.
I want to talk about a great organization called Engineers Without Borders. You know, Doctors Without Borders. So, Engineers Without Borders, they are an incredibly adaptable organization and made up of engineers who have a different sort of line of thought and who have been taught and educated in a traditional way of being, and malleability is important, and being able to adapt is important. And I love, I need to just acknowledge with thanks your metaphor for the boat, for the anchor, you know,
Sure.
because when we talk about, because the lesson that I gave at what Applied Improv gave to this organization of Engineers Without Borders was a deep appreciation for what resiliency looks like and how we can adapt to our and embrace different parts of resiliency. You know, I mean, when you think of a huge, strong oak tree, you know, just hundreds of years old and steadfast, and you know, no wind can blow this thing down. Sometimes our resiliency looks like that, and we get that. Sometimes resiliency looks like a reed in the wind that has that necessary flexibility and it bounces right back up. But sometimes adaptability looks like that type of tree that seemingly without any type of life force or nutrients available to it, its root structure adapts to its environment, and yet it still thrives. And this one organization, this one chapter of Engineers Without Borders, really needed to know and embrace that necessary adaptability, because they are getting past the borders and the BS and you know, they are needing to get drill wells and get clean water into some of the most difficult places on this planet, and with limited resources, and their need to adapt is vitally important, and learning how to improvise with what they have and to accept the reality and if you will, what they could do with a different idea, and co-creation, and importantly with the individuals in that community and where they were working, direct application for building an ensemble. You know, Dave Cook is a great guy with the American Society of Civil Engineers. He happens to be on the cover of his alma mater, Arizona State University. He's a geologist, and on the cover it says, you know, he's a rock star. and
I
he is
like that.
the yeah he is the president of Engineers Without Borders. And it is just, I'm in awe. I'm a fan of any organization that can embrace creativity with the intellectual rigor and effective gain. You know, our educators talk about effective gain all the time, that emotional willingness to learn. And you mentioned it as well around, you know, that people must be, you got to see the signposts for adaptability coming. You know, we must be willing to change. And if we're not, you use the word awareness several times. And you know, what is that? Another organization that I worked with was the University of Toronto pharmacy program. Was a pilot project for us to build improv in our residency program in medical schools. And indeed, even to there is now an improv exercise embedded right into the medical school interview. And I'll just tell you that Mcmaster University, which is a world-renowned, Canada's most research-intensive university in Hamilton, Ontario, has a very innovative medical school. And their proprietary mode of interviewing people is called the MMI, Mcmaster Mini Interview. So instead of being the traditional, you know, eight usually men behind a big table interviewing one medical school candidate, they have tiny stations, literally different rooms, where the candidate goes through very quick 6 to 8 minutes, very intense interviews. And they're, you know, interviewing for all sorts of different things, you know, not just the clinical knowledge, but their listening skills and empathy skills and things like that. And there was this one station called the origami station. And two candidates, one had a sheet of paper with instructions, origami instructions to how to build a swan. And the other individual needed to listen and do spatial, you know, understand how to, you know, they needed to work together to do this. Well, medical students, being medical students, everybody boned up on their origami stations and origami skills. And that was really no longer valid. And yet, you know, the evidence shows that the more empathy our healthcare professional has, the better clinical decision he makes and the better clinical result, you know? So we have this proprietary special improv exercises, because you cannot prepare for improv. And they're looking at, and they do so to build and to look for and assess empathy in medical students. So that's another example of where, you know, applied improv really worked well. I'll also share that we just received word that our clinical paper has been accepted for publication. We had a trial at the university to lower anxiety, social anxiety symptomology using applied improvisation. We had proper pre and post qualitative and quantitative measures to do this, and it was unbelievably successful. It was really good. So yeah.
I look forward to that. You know, I'm sure there's still people listening who their anxiety stick would go up at the very thought of improv. But in all things, the thought of something versus the doing of it is very different. And we can build up things in our mind to such a state that then just getting stuck in and doing. It's like me with loads of my work tasks, you know, I think about them, I build them up. Oh, I've got this, you know, presentation to do. I've got this, you know, piece to do. And then doing it, I know it's going to work out. I know it's going to happen. And there's a couple of bits I want to pick up on. One was you reflected back about awareness and awareness being used. And it was one of the things that motivated us around adaptability and trying to bring awareness of AQ, because we don't know what we don't know, and we can't improve what we don't measure. You know, there's all these various things that people have said. We can rationalize it, but can we then experience it? If we're trying to problem solve something and we're in a room and it's pitch black, our ability to deal with that's going to be harder than if we are aware of what's around us. So if adaptability changes from just being this word with kind of strange understanding, or is it resilience? Is it flexibility? Is it grit? All of these things that we can put some language to it. We can build some labels and say, this is resilience, or, and it looks like a pencil and we use it in this way. This is this, and this is how you use it. You can then start to lever that for problem solving. And what I think is so fascinating, the other part was the origami with instructions. And so many organizations yearn for an instruction manual.
Don't they?
We need a plan. What's our process? What's the list of tasks? All of those things. And then we can go. And the reality is, in lots of these things, is the path reveals its way when we start walking.
Oh,
and, that's so great. That's kind of my best version of the poem quote. So, it's not exactly right, but the essence is there. Is this, dichotomy between needing structure and plans to just get started and build it along the road. And this is the dilemma for companies, isn't it? In situations of rapid change versus predictability, uncertainty versus certainty, is when are instruction manuals valuable? When is just being able to improv, being able to problem solve, being able to have these core baseline skills, whether they're called soft or essential, being able to communicate with people. You talked about candor in teamwork, radical candor, to be able to give feedback, to have that safety. This, to me, Dan Sullivan talks about a 25-year commitment to things. Are you going to be endlessly fascinated and motivated in the area that you choose? The more I go down this rabbit hole, the more energy I get.
Me too.
And it's wonderful.
It is an absolute contagion. And you know what? It is a social contagion, because we all have it. When I watch intuitive knowledge come to the fore, and to be witness to someone who truly delights in their own creation and co-creation with another, I tell you, Ross, it's incredible. It's magnetic. There is something untapped. And you talk about awareness. We, in my improv workshops, we talk about the importance between a reaction and a response. A reaction and a response. I tell you, the difference is huge. And we often employ silence in a scene in order to bring silence as another character on stage. And I know that sounds like totally artsy and weird, but I tell you, it gives us that awareness, that 4-beat silence informs. And it is amazing to watch two players become emotionally aligned and where they're going now with the scene together. We have an ability to, right now I'm working with an organization in Detroit I'm part of a anti-racist white educator group who is I'm developing a workshop, and it is unlearning. It is unlearning, and the necessary discomfort in that, and employing silence and unlearning and following, what Barry O'Reilly talks about in his research, watching our behavior impact the change and having a new perspective. Everything in applied improv does that. I often give people homework from a workshop, and for your listeners, I would, I double dare you to go see more. And writers do this all the time. If you are, in the next week or so, if you are in a grocery store waiting in line 6 feet apart, distancing, and you're in our masks, we are often waiting, and waiting when we are in solitary time can be used to cultivate our adaptability, our perspective, our point of view. What I would task my improv class with is to look at the cashier, watch the cashier, give that cashier a story, give her put meat on the bones. To ask, was she born in Canada? Where was she from? What did she want to be when she was 12? How many children does she have? What was the best day of her life? What was the worst? Build a story, and it doesn't just it offers us an ability and an opportunity to look at the other. Largely why the world is so politically polarized, is because we define ourselves not who we are, but who we are not. And we have a great dislike of the other. We have a fear of the other. We have oh my God, we drop anchor in what we know, what we think we know, what we believe. What we believe to be true is what we believe to be right. And I tell you, you talk about people in the comfort zone having a time limit on their existence. So too, do we have that type of mentality, that mindset where we are just set in our ways. It is, improv is not a thing. It is not a tangible thing. Improv is a way. It is a way of thinking. It is a way of allowing different ideas. Yep.
There's two stories I want to share. One, I couldn't stop smiling because
I know
you were describing a game that my wife Karen and I play on many occasions. We'll sit and we'll watch others, whether we're in a restaurant or in a park, and we'll pick a character each that we're watching, and we'll give them who they are. So we give them the name, what they do, what challenge they had yesterday, what they're not looking forward to, what they're excited about. And we just create this, life and story of other people when we're sat there. And it's most fun. And for Karen and I, sometimes it gets silly because you get really random names, and really radical bits. But it's also to take us out of ourselves.
Right.
To go into a world intentionally. And often, one of the challenges you talked about there was almost this echo chamber that we all live in.
Mm-hmm.
And when do we take a vacation from there? When do we go and explore and pioneer a new world? And that's reading an opposing thought. That's reading something that's different. That's watching something that's different that you might not watch before. Yes. And looking for the beauty in it, because there's beauty there. And there's also something to be grateful for. And that's completely your response. So this is, what is it doing for me, not to me? Just all of these clever little just thought processes and framings can help us face whatever challenge we're facing. So many are facing the reality of, are they going to be going back into work? Here in the UK, we've got so many people that have been furloughed. I didn't even know what the word furlough was until COVID,
Exactly.
And, in the US, masses unemployed. We're not going to suddenly flick a switch and it will go back to, employed and all of these companies as they were before. Now is a perfect opportunity to go on a vacation to another potential world. And the difference between our stories being a collection of our experiences in the past to our stories of scenarios of what if. And so for ourselves, this job interviews, all of these things, tell me about what you've done, about your experience, tell me an example here. I do it still the same, tell me about an example when it does. What a difference it would be is, what if this happened, tell me, what would you do? Right. And so if our listeners in an improv situation is, what if no rules, no history, we could start in a new postcode, in a new area, in a new way. What would we then want to do? Who would we want around us?
Right.
What would we want to take with us? What would we want to leave behind? And that's the essence of unlearning. I want to kind of finish off. I am confident there's going to be lots of people who are now super excited to embrace an improv. How could they get in contact with you? How could they reach out to you? And also, where would you advise they start in terms of some of those improvs? You mentioned one great thing, observe a cashier. Great.
Sure.
So a couple
It's
of different questions there.
solo improv, right?
Solo
Yeah.
improv. How do people get in touch with you and reach out to you? And the second, just a couple of extra little bits that people might be able to go to if they're curious about improv and about how that can help them with their mental agility and innovation and problem solving.
Oh, thank you. What a generous question, Ross. My company is Nancy Watt Communications. I run a program called H.A.P.P.I.E, H.A.P.P.I.E, which is an acronym for How to Apply Positive Psychology Improv Exercises. So whether you want to build cohesion or collaboration or creativity or better communication or clarity, whatever, there are very specific improv exercises that allow people to have that direct learning experience. And thank God, since COVID, many of them are translating well online. I'm doing Zoom workshops all the time. And in fact, for the anxiety group, we have now renamed it Connection Deficit Disorder, not Attention Deficit Disorder, but Connection Deficit Disorder. Mm-hmm. And we're doing well there. I want to tell you about a couple games. One of the things that is, because many teams on Zoom are still using PowerPoint. I know. But PowerPoint karaoke is a wonderful improv exercise. Have you ever played this, Ross? Do you know?
I have not played this.
Oh my God, you would be great. You would be great at this. I give you, and if people want it, please contact me, Nancy at nancywattcom.com. And it is a deck of PowerPoint slides that you have never seen before in your life. You then get an offer. I give you a topic you know nothing about. And off the cuff, in an improvised state, you have to segue every scene, every next slide that comes in the deck of slides, and you have to improvise an expert topic about, I don't know, pineapples or kayaking or something like that, right? And it is amazing. You know, we talk about the connection in our teams. We talk about, you know, the co-creation and watching the audience be invested in the spontaneity and the knowledge that comes out of an in-the-minute presentation. It's awesome. I was with a group of engineers oh my God, I tell you, you know, the engineers are fascinating to work with, and they're really my favorite. Do you know what it sounds like when an old engineer changes his mind, Ross? He goes like this. That's it. That's you know, like that. And
that was the phase change in the brain. Yeah,
exactly. He's like, They loved this game because it pulled them out of their invested knowledge and into creativity. And there is and they had their audience with them along the way. You know, neuron mirroring, right? How the brain waves become in sync and stuff like that, and that happens there. When we talk to our teams about adaptability, and when we bring our own experience to it, and in the improv world, we talk about story. And story at its most skeletal is what we like to say: what, so what, now what? And let me tell you, this is all over your AQ, all over your research. I have loved, what is it? So what, so what, now what?
Now what?
And at its most basic, that's an improv scene.
It is. I'm gonna set us both a challenge if you're up for it. And if the listeners have lasted this long, this is going to be a great little bonus for you. I want to connect again, and we'll create a adaptability focused improv PowerPoint Zoom game.
Stop it. And love that idea.
One of the things is the danger of Zoom is to see people as task avatars. And we are losing this, as you said, connection. And we try and build it in, you know, we have what's the positive focus before any meeting, you know, we have various things that we're building in. And on Fridays, we have our, you know, Friday drinks via Zoom. And we've been doing quizzes. I would love to be able to have a improv adaptability PowerPoint kind of game piece. So let's create one in time for when this comes live, so that if people listen to this, we'll have that on the link, and we'll do that for everybody. I think that would be wicked.
That is brilliant. So much fun. So
Let's
much
do it.
fun. I can hardly wait.
Great
Oh,
stuff. Well,
so
it's
great.
been a real pleasure. I'm on my endless pursuit of expanding my own knowledge and learning. And selfishly,
Me too.
that's, a big motivator for me to have these podcast conversations. And hopefully the audience has been inspired, picked up a few things that they can experiment maybe for the first time, or for those that are improv people that have done it many times before, you can bring some other people with you. That's been super, Nancy, and I look forward to
Oh, you're
creating
delightful,
something
Ross.
new
Thank
together.
you. Likewise. Likewise. Have a great evening. Thank you.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQ.me assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams, and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.